of the conversation.
I'm sure you will find. It's a diagnostic conversation. You're doing a diagnostics with me on the big themes.
Oké, we lopen. Dus,
Oké. Hoor je ons goed ook?
testen. Zag er wel goed uit. Meters. Zeg eens test?
Yes, hello, test.
Testing.
Perfect.
Perfect, oké.
Perfecto, amigo.
Oké. Doe jij maar even een countdown en dan beginnen we echt.
Is goed. 3, 2, 1.
Action. Ennio, thank you for taking the time today to discuss some of the ongoings of the energy sector, and I think there are some pretty significant changes ongoing at the moment. I think this also comes at a very fitting time with ITEMS around the corner. For those who are listening, ITEMS is the International Transmission Asset Management Study Benchmark. It is a collaboration between the front-running TSOs from across the globe, where we discuss the best practices of asset management, some of the major themes that are ongoing within the sector. But before we dive into all of those details, I think it would be important to understand, first of all, a little bit of your background. You've been in this industry for multiple decades. Some would say longer than I've been on this earth. But what have you found to be some of the most significant and profound changes from when you started to where we are today?
Well, it depends on which perspective you take. If you take the perspective of the Guild of the Management Consultant, it is that when I started to do this, we basically, as management consultants, we had like 10 steps ahead of the customer.
Yeah.
Why? Because of the education, because of the experience, because of doing multiple clients, seeing so many different processes and things that you could basically give back to the next one, and the fact that the customer would not be in the position to learn the same thing by his or her experience or in university. Now that has changed. So let's say 40 years ago it was like that, 10 steps ahead, and I would say 10 years ago we would be like -8. So 2 steps ahead. Why 2 steps ahead? Because in the meantime, over 30 years, the opportunity for people to learn the typical consulting process skills were also taught in university, and yeah, basically the generation of consultants that started in consultancy were the same ones that studied with their fellow students, and some of them went into line jobs, into big corporations, and others went into consultancy. But the blend was not so was not so complicated. So basically, coming down from 10 steps ahead to 2 steps ahead. And what are the 2 steps? The 2 steps are basically that the consultant until 10 years ago was still going from client to client, from process to process, from different companies to different companies, and the accumulation of compressed learning was also then provided back into the market, but still at a 2-step ahead type of way. Today we are even in a accelerated change where the functionality of a consultant is again changing because of AI. Now we have everyone has the opportunity to learn theory and to basically do write-ups and stuff using artificial intelligence. The 1 step ahead still will always be that the consultant still has the practical experience and has the ability to implement changes based on the experience that he or she has had in recent times. So I would think that is one of the major changes when it comes to consulting. When you look into the totally different in the energy market, the change is even bigger. Why? Because like 40, 50 years ago, the energy market was a lot about based on the conventional, on hydrocarbons, and basically market mechanisms, optimizations of supply chains, etc. That was always there, and it's still there today. But now the mix has changed. Back in let's say 30, 40 years ago, the world was not so multipolar as it is now. The parameters were less. The KPIs which basically were guiding the performance of energy companies were very different. When you take oil companies, there was always long-term planning on the one hand, and on the other hand, you had the quarterly results, which were also pressing. But now all of that has changed in the mix, and what you see now is that the biggest consideration is the energy transition. It's resilience on let's say, global developments from a supply chain perspective, but also geopolitical, which is a more, let's say, is increasingly creating issues in the market, as well as in companies' planning. So what once was a commodity has now become a strategic. The political pressure, the ideological pressure of society on energy companies to perform differently is very, very high. It's not always clear where the economic justification is for all the things that we are faced with, but that's one of the biggest changes. So I would say that compared to, let's say, 40 years ago, now the focus is way more on how to manage the energy transition. Actually, the industry has become much more existential. The questions that the industries are faced with, the energy industries, because it's utilities, oil and gas, and there's renewables, nuclear. It's all about the existential question: what is it that we need to do in order to be here in 10, 20 years from now? Still, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, the big issue that, for example, utilities industries face is that they are systemic companies. And when I say systemic companies, that means that those are the companies that are pillars to society. Like banks are systemic. Utilities, supply and distribution and transmission are systemic. If one of that would fail, society would be in chaos. In simple words, keep the cash machines going, and the ability for supermarkets to get paid for people shopping with cards, etc. It's that's where the banks become systemic. It's less of our focus.
Mm-hmm.
But in the energy sector, it's similar, but it's less considered and less, I would say, less visible in the market. But clearly, if a transmission fails, a transmission company would fail. It would, of course, immediately switch out the lights or something like that. We have seen recently in Spain, Portugal. We have seen it in South America a couple of times. And when that happens, it's really consequences are dire. So those are the changes that I see, and that's where we see that we are faced with today.
From what I gather in the way you're speaking, I sense there's a greater sense of urgency. I think there's the energy sector has always been important, and I gather that there's a lot of change required, a lot of urgency, and a lot of almost attention to some of the matters you've discussed that need to happen quickly, but also needs to be managed in an appropriate way. You also talk about how critical it is to society and where it's going to go from there. You also mentioned terms like energy transition, resilience, AI, geopolitical challenges, and how all of that is having an impact on the energy sector. So with all that in mind, we've also shaped with the way the ITEMS conference is going to be organized. On day one, it will be predominantly about resilience. We speak about digitalization as well. To your mind, how do you define resilience, and why is it important? Why should we care about the importance of resilience?
Well, first of all, resilience now is not just a buzzword. It's really a theme that has that is intrinsically driving organizations, because resilience is really about survival. It is about the, like I previously mentioned, the existential question. What do we need to do in order to survive? Those questions have also been asked before, but companies used to have a plan A, a plan B, but there was no plan C, right? And if you really ask for a plan B, you do the resilience check with companies, and we have done that on numerous occasions. And often we found that companies often are not so resilient as they think they are, because when issues really starts to happen, it is often the case that companies are not ready to mitigate the issue, the disruption that has occurred. We've seen that at the end they will, of course, but not maybe in a response time that would be mandatory for certain disruptions, and that's a big concern. Yeah, that's a big concern. It's the same like hospitals; they do also resilience checks. So what happens if if there's a power outage? How do we keep the machines ongoing? Because people would be dying right away if electricity would drop out, right? So I think hospitals are a good example of how serious they take the resilience questions and the plan B and the plan C. It's less so for the energy sector. It's now changing, of course, because resilience has landed on the C-level desk these days, and it's good that it has landed there because it starts with the sense of awareness, an awareness level for we need to do something, and then of course, what is it that we need to do the proper analysis to ensure that nothing has been skipped, that all the black spots have been put some light on, let's say, to make it visible what it is that we really need to look at. And sometimes you only get to find that out when trouble starts, when there's a disruption that you didn't gosh, we didn't think about that, and then suddenly you'll find that there was something else that you have skipped in your resilience verification or your resilience checkup or your readiness check.
Yeah.
In Spain, when that early this year happened, which was affecting Portugal and Spain as well. Shortly after, it was a concept royal decree, which was addressing the issues that became clear after the blackout had occurred. But this is always the case. The sense of urgency sometimes becomes vivid the moment when something really bad has happened or a disruption has happened that no one thought was possible, for example.
Yeah. I think what you're highlighting there is sometimes there needs to be a significant moment for catalyst for change. Unfortunately, that's how sometimes society goes. And I think what you're trying to highlight is sometimes with resilience, it should be preventative and not necessarily the cure. So we should be anticipating what could happen. And something that I've found to be quite significant from what I've gathered from talking to various clients across the TSOs is the challenge that they're, I think, going through is from a resilience standpoint, you're almost having to anticipate 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ahead. And with that requires funding. How do you, and some of the things that they talk to me about is, how do I convince senior leaders on, okay, we need X amount for the future. We need to attribute these resources to this because this might happen, or this might happen, this might happen. So the question I have is, how do you balance that between, okay, today we need to do this and tomorrow we need to go there? How do you balance that trade-off between today this is important, but increasingly what will become more important is what could happen tomorrow, what could happen in 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. Let's start with distinguishing the private sector and the let's say the regulated sector. If you talk about regulated sector, what I always find interesting is that people start to talk about budget. It's like in government, right? They always say, we need so many millions, so many billions for this or for that. I think it should be the other way around. You first try to identify what it is that you need, and then you qualify what you need, and then you quantify what you need, and then you make the budget, and then you start to source. That would be the sequence of things. So it is interesting if in a TSO people are saying, but we need so many millions in order to prevent or to plan for for future events that could occur, could not occur. First of all, it starts with asking a bottom line question: what is our key task? Okay, I don't think that, or I think that companies don't do that enough. Asking repeatedly, what are we here for? You know, what is our mission and purpose in life? Confined to the company, to the business. And if that question is coherent and consistent, then sometimes you need to test whether you are still on the right path, right? And normally you get to see that also for TSOs, but for any type of company, is that they have the industrial plans for the next 5 to 10 years. But what you often see as well is that they sometimes forgotten about the resilience aspect that need to be considered in those plans as well. So asking how to budget or how to mitigate a gap in perceived urgency, because that's kind of what I feel was the question. Is that you have to communicate to the board what is really key for you, and how are we going to bridge the reason, the raison d'être, the reason behind why are we here, between what we are doing in order to sustain ourselves and to make it happen. And resilience is a significant part of that. And you cannot really quantify resilience.
No.
Okay.
That's the challenge, yeah.
You can quantify the activities that you need to undertake to mitigate challenges in the field of resilience. So, in other words, becoming resilient. But in order to become resilient, you need to first understand what the threats are that are on your path.
Yeah. So with that in mind, if you look at the current, let's say the utilities specifically, because obviously with the item conference that caters towards predominantly the utilities world, what would you say is the current state of the utilities from a resilience perspective? Where do you think they are today, and where do you think they need to go?
Well, let's start with the upside. I think that most utilities companies, especially TSO, are perfectly aware. It depends a little bit on which region you are, because it also depends on to what extent renewables are integrated into the grid and not. If as long as a country is completely or almost completely conventional, there are less issues, business as usual. If you take Saudi Arabia, for example, the majority of electricity is still produced through hydrocarbons, and although they are building the biggest solar park in the world, and it makes sense, of course, country like that. But the resilience question is less weighing on their minds and on their KPI dashboard. For other TSOs, especially Europeans, it's quite a big theme. So it's on the board, but I still think that from having senior management attention to execution, to ensuring that all plans are in place to mitigate even the unexpected, the unknown, to basically cover the black box, so to say. I don't think that is in place yet. There's still some way to go. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because from the experience that I've gathered working with these TSOs is, like you say, from a seniority perspective and management board perspective, it is widely discussed. There are plans, there are discussions around it, but there is a mismatch or almost a misalignment between what is happening from the top management down to the operational level. And I think that's going to be quite difficult, because a lot of the time you want to see line of sight. You want to see what's happening up top is being actualized in the bottom. So I completely understand and I completely agree with some of the points that you're making. But if you were to hypothesize, you look to the future. Now we're talking with, let's say you had a few senior leaders around the table. What do you think they would be looking to achieve in sort of 10, 15 years time? What are the sort of definitions and things that need to be in place for it to be considered resilient? What do you think would be there?
Well, there are several, I call it categories of threats. Okay, so there is this whole climate and environmental category, and that has a number of, let's say, parameters that need to be considered. Then there is the geopolitical dimension. Geopolitical dimension is a huge black box of a number of parameters. You know, because there is a lot of, let's say, unknown factors. There are indicators. You know, war. You know, let's take Russia, Ukraine. Let's take what's happening in the Middle East. All of that has disruptions on the supply chain. The way that, for example, West Europe is looking at their manufacturing industries, that is not helpful because that basically seems to be a tendency to reduce manufacturing capability in Western Europe. Consequence of that is that a lot of that is outsourced to other places, which basically makes certain key goods from a commodity would become strategic suddenly, and something that initially you took a month to get ordered now could take half a year. You know, and those changes are not necessarily fully incorporated in the mindset, neither in the procurement domain, nor in the supply chain domain, nor in the planning domain, nor in the financial domain. Because in the financial domain, they need to be able to budget certain things, and if you can't really if you don't consider those changes, then you know it's going to be problematic. On the other hand, companies are faced with a lot of capex demand. You know, for example, if you take grid companies, they need to build, expand the grid. The electrification is moving forward, albeit a bit slower than people think. You know, because it still needs to be feasible. And it doesn't seem to be as feasible as people 6-7 years thought it would be. So the consequence of that is that, so for example, you see that electrical cars are, you know, the sale of electric cars, although the market is coming up, but it's still relatively slowing down compared to what people expected. Supply of electricity is an issue. It could be mitigated relatively easily, but then you still require the grid. So the grid requires a huge capex. And if you look into the supply chain of that capex, considering what's happening in the world, then it suddenly is not so. No. It's not a given that you are really able to meet your capex plan within the budgeted years or the planned years.
There's definitely a shortage of material in that respect. I know especially within Europe, there is an element of competition for competing for the same resources. Yeah. I think that was prominent based on the discussions I was experiencing with some of the TSOs. But you also spoke about building the grid, talking about capex, significant percentage increases in capex, and with that, a slight shift in the conversation is digitalization. So how it's viewed sometimes, and it can be viewed in a positive way or in a negative way. There are opportunities and there are also threats with digitalization. And how I like to see it is digitalization is more of an enabler. It enables the improvement of the grid. When you hear the term digitalization, how it can have an impact on the asset-intensive industry, or particularly within the utilities, how do you see it from an opportunity perspective, but also from a threat perspective?
Yeah, well, let's start with a very basic and simple example. So 30 years ago, I did a pipeline project, which was a maintenance project. And we had to measure corrosion in the pipe. You know, it was an oil pipe, a very long oil pipe in Europe. Yeah. I'm not going to say which one, but it was a very important one. And it's crossing Germany, so...
There we go, give some hints. Yeah.
But there we were measuring corrosion, and it was corrosion that basically was randomly tested after so many kilometers of pipe. You took samples, and you went to see the corrosion levels. It went to a lab, and then you did a bit of a study and an analysis, and that was basically almost like handwritten in a computer, and then a file was produced, and and that was data. Okay.
Yeah.
Today, to stay in the same domain, a pipe, whether it's gas, oil, or even water, for corrosion is now tested in a completely different way. You have these, I call it drone peaks. They basically are, like a rat going through a pipe. And inspecting it on a continuous, let's say, process in progress. And rather than on every kilometer, or every 2 kilometers, or every 10 kilometers, you get every 5 meters. You get a report, and instead of having it once a month, or once half a year, or once a year, you get it almost on a daily, if not a weekly basis. So the amount of data has multiplied exponentially beyond imagination, beyond what we could have imagined, let's say 20, 30 years ago. Okay, so that's the first. That data needs to be elaborated. So what happens? And this is just one example. In the utilities, in the transmission domain, you have drones doing maintenance surveys over these poles, right? So similar issue. Before, you had a blue collar guy doing the handwritten reporting, and all of that was pretty conventional and manageable by people. And now it's done by drones, and the multiplier of data output is tremendous. So all of that needs to be managed. And the issue is, if you are able to aggregate the data and to basically extract the right information from it, then it's perfectly fine. But if you get huge data lakes and you skip some of the information, you get of that data, you get information that is not entirely reflecting the objective truth, right? And if you have information that is not entirely correct, which leads to intelligence that is not entirely correct, and that intelligence is then supposed to provide capital decisions, high risk, mid risk, low risk type of scenario planning for the future, you get wrong planning, and that can be, from a financial economic side, that can be $1 billion mistake.
Significant implications.
Significant implications, because if you do a long-term planning, you also have to you plan your capex, you have to plan with suppliers and all kinds of resources that you can think of. So the issue is really significant. So it starts with having good data. So the digitalization is a great thing. I think it should enable, like you said, it should be an enabler to allow the industry to be even more precise, to become, by the way, also more resilient. Because if you know more, you can anticipate better on events, and you can also, your preventive maintenance schedules, for example, would dramatically improve by knowing more about it, right? And your maintenance strategies could change significantly, but also your capex for future extensions or renewables, or let's say your renew plan could significantly benefit from having the right level of data and the right usage of the data. So the weak point in the whole chain is the way data is managed, the way data is governed, and the way data is interpreted. That is still a big challenge, I think, and that needs to be mitigated in order to make digitalization really valuable for not just the utility industry, but if we confine ourselves to the energy at large, then I would say for everyone, for refinery, gas storage, pipelines, midstream, upstream, downstream, you name it. It is important to have that straightened out.
I understand the importance attributed to data. I think if you look at the drones, you could almost see it as an opportunity. Like you said, it used to be done by blue-collar workers, and now it's done by drones. And that's increased not only the effectiveness, but the efficiency of which data is connected. But you also spoke about how data needs to be managed and the importance of why data should be managed. And I think how I view that is a serious threat. I mean, we're getting all this vast amounts of data, incredible amounts of data, and the size of it is huge. And I do think there is a significant threat to how that data should be managed. Now, with all that data, you also mentioned the idea of objective truth. I think the term that I often hear with a lot of the people I speak with is the single source of truth. And that's how that's become such a difficult point. So where one department may have a certain bit of information, the other department might have different bits of information, and how that can be quite conflicting. Now, if you were let's say, hypothetically, the CEO of this company, why should the CEO or senior person within that organization care? Why should they look at that and think, okay, that's something we need to put some attention behind?
Well, for all the reasons that I mentioned before, right? If the quality of your data is questionable. So I give you an example. I have had at least 90 plus interviews and sessions with executives in the energy companies. They're not just confined to utilities, to a number of them. And I asked those, the famous question. So to what extent do you trust the data quality to be reliable for strategic decision making, to provide you with the right level of intel in order for you to make trustworthy decisions on a scale of 1 to 5. Whereas 5 is, of course, 100% is completely blindly trust the data, and 1 is no trust at all, very, very little. They were all very polite, and almost with 1 or 2 exceptions, out of them plus 90 plus people that I spoke with, no one dared to exceed 3.
Okay, interesting.
And the issue is, if you don't trust your data 100%, then you really cannot trust the final output that data is going to provide you with. If it's not 100%, it's problematic.
Yeah.
Right? So 3 is problematic. People could argue, yeah, but 3 is kind of good, because it's more than 2.5. And so therefore, from a school report level, it would be sufficient. You would pass the exam.
Yeah.
But with data quality, you don't. It's like saying, the maintenance of an airplane is 7 or 8. No, that's not good enough, because the plane could still fall down, right?
Yeah.
The maintenance need to be 100% need to be 10. And the similar issues are basically playing here as well. As long as a company cannot trust the 100% reliability of the data that they use for decision making, because maybe some of that data is not even used for decision making, and then it's still not good, but it's then left out of the equation.
Yeah.
But that is a challenge,
Yeah.
right? So if I would be the CEO of a utility company, for example, I would demand that we have a golden source or a single source of truth data that is absolutely, completely reliable. Or otherwise, we just are not going to invest in digitalizing certain aspects of the business. Why would we, if the data that is produced by that digitalization of that element of the business is not providing us with, valuable tools to manage and to perform better than we did before.
Yeah. So you mentioned there the no trust in data, and you mentioned how with that why that could be an issue. If you look at the bit with lost my track of thoughts here. With how, if you could elaborate on what you just discussed and why that should be an issue. Where do consultants fit in that picture? So now flipping it back to where we are, where could we provide that element of value?
Well, first of all, we would be objective, right? At least in our case, we would be. We would be brutally honest. And if something doesn't work, we would probably the ones to say that it doesn't work, and why it wouldn't, why it needs to change. Second, we, because of the experience that we have in a variety of companies, we can also outline the process in order to improve the quality and the usage and the governance of data, which, by the way, we did now on a number of occasions with a number of companies in Europe and beyond. Okay, so that's where we come in. And what is the difference between internally seeking out stuff and doing it yourself and having external support? Well, simply if you are an internal resource, your agenda may be different, right? You may be paying lip service to your boss or to the line in order to ensure that you are not held responsible for certain situations. That happens a lot. Managers and executives have their own personal dashboards, which performance dashboards, for which they are accountable. And sometimes it is just good to have consultants around to, well, first of all, to lean off the responsibility a little bit. If things go, don't work out so well, you can always blame the consultant.
Yeah,
I'm not joking. That happened a lot to me.
Yeah.
And that's one. But on the other hand, the consultant also is his prime objective is to bring everything in his experience and knowledge in order to mitigate or to address the issue, to basically achieve the scope of the project.
Yeah.
Because we, of course, define issues as a project.
Yeah. With that in mind, I think what you highlighted is, for example, I think in the beginning of the conversation, you spoke about the different companies you were present at, the different processes you experienced, and leveraging that and understanding the different knowledge and experiences you've learned from various different processes, but also very different departments. So with that in mind, ITEMS also, what it does is it brings, as you're aware, the different various TSOs from across the globe. And from what I've seen as well is that different TSOs approach things differently. And I think there are different challenges across different TSOs that I've seen as quite significant. So, for example, what could occur within Europe and what could occur outside of Europe are also vastly different from a resilience and from a digitalization standpoint. And I think earlier you also alluded to the intertwine of resilience and digitalization, which is why I think that's a very focal point at the ITEMS conference. I think you've already briefly alluded to it, but why are we talking about resilience and digitalization and not other topics? Why are those two the forefront?
The three hairy, audacious goals and themes are the energy transition, are digitalization and resilience, whereas honestly, resilience is kind of horizontal through the other two, if you consider those other two like being vertical in the business, although that's not entirely true because digitalization is also horizontally to be considered horizontal in a process shape. But for example, the energy transition is a big theme. So everyone embarking on the energy transition is met with issues around if you do things, if you change things, you need to ask whether that change is going to be a threat to your existence. And then you have a resilience question. A refinery has thinking about reduction emission of reduction of emissions, of reducing the hydrocarbons per se is basically like saying, okay, but that's the core of our business. So basically, if we are not going to focus on our future added value as a refinery in 10, 15 years from now, we're out of business. We are a dying industry. And I think many people out there want this to be a dying industry, forgetting that the petrochemical refining is key for almost everything we see around us. If you think away plastics out of society, we would not come out of our house because we would be naked, right? Yeah. So that's the hard and the harsh truth. And if you take the energy transition only from an ideological perspective, then that's not the best station for departure. You need to also consider the real requirements for society in the near and long term future. But where resilience and digitalization therefore come into place is because digitalization is an unavoidable type of development, right? I don't want to sound old, but I still recall the introduction of the fax machine. And that we went from a dial telephone to the button phone, and the phone that was hanging in the corridors of the house, which now completely vanished from, your generation doesn't even have experienced that at all.
Not really. No.
So a lot has changed, and the digitalization is one of those topics that we can't really avoid, that we shouldn't be wanting to avoid, and we should embrace
it. Yeah.
But be smart about it, right? And smart about new technologies, new developments means that you. As soon as something becomes a hype, any critical look at what it really brings is type of skipped, right? Everyone gets into the buzz and we need to do the AI. Everyone is kind of captured by AI. And you see mushrooming AI enterprises left and right, and like the internet in the end of the 90s. It's all everything was mushrooming left and right. New initiatives, the .com era. And well, we've seen where that went, and the similar development will also be part of the let's say the AI developments, but that has an impact. So I'm just thinking out loud now, but if I would think that decision makers in especially in long-term industries or systemic companies need to cool down, not embrace the hype, but look what it's really the bottom line of the new developments, what it really means, going to the essence of AI. What does AI really mean besides the hype and the fact that people can now write up their emails and letters to each other? I even have seen people in a friendly context writing each other using chat, not even using their own language. I don't think that's a positive development, by the way, but all that is an exponent of hypes. It's hype. If we undo the hype a little bit and we look at the essence, so what is going to remain, what is going to be serving the business, then that's the analysis and that's the focus where it should, where we should look at.
Yeah, you mentioned twice now the term bottom line. What is bottom line, and why should I care about bottom line? If I was, for example, the CEO of a company, what is bottom line, and what is the significance of it?
That is a bit of bottom line from in general terms means basically the net earnings, the bottom line results, etc. But bottom line is also the essence of truth for a company. And the way I like to apply the term bottom line from time to time is to basically undo it from all the frizzles. And basically see what the bottom line reality is. What is it that the essence of things? What is it that we really need to work with? And that's in these days, I think that is very, very complicated to understand what is the essence of a development. And to basically, like I said, undo the frizzles and the decorations and the hype that is around a certain development, or whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's digitalization. Always ask yourself the question: is this what I'm witnessing? Is this really something that is sustainable? Is that here to stay? Is it going to stay in the way it's now proposed to us? Don't surf with the first wave that's coming up, because that is not necessarily the one that's taking you to the beach, right?
Yeah. Understood. So if we slightly pivot from that, and with all your experience within the energy sector for the number of years you've been in, what is...
You're making me. You're making this kind of.
No, I'm not trying to exaggerate your age. No. But what is if you had to pinpoint, what is the one threat that keeps you up at night? Not that many things do, hopefully. But what if you had to pinpoint to one particular threat, what would keep you up at night from all the things you've experienced and witnessed? What would you say that is?
I would say that the sustainability of the things that we are doing. For future generations, that is really a concern. I have my private thoughts about climate change, I am very concerned about the environment, and am concerned about the disconnect between industry leaders, politicians, and society at large about our global priorities. And that is a concern that sometimes keeps me awake at night. You know, wars, propaganda, and all those things seem to distract us from what is really really important. And that and the industry that we are in is a pillar to society at large, right? So if we can contribute in the line of, let's say, in the line of duty, you know, to our industry, I think we have some leverage into making the society a little bit more sustainable. So if there's one way that I and you know, in the company with me can assist in contributing a little bit to that, then that would be kind of what I would be looking at.
Yeah, that's sort of the mission, and taking it one step closer to achieving those things.
Yeah, well, you know, you and I have also had different conversations, and when I talk about values, for us the value is not just about making money in the things that we do. I mean, earnings are a necessary effect of doing the right things, okay? And but most of all, I think it is important that we deliver value, tangible value to companies where they can progress, especially on the key themes that we have previously already mentioned. You know, I can't say it enough, but energy transition, digitalization, and resilience. If we can contribute to companies to overcome the challenges that they find in those three areas, especially in our sector. So from an asset management perspective within utilities and within the broader energy industries, I think that's what our objective is. And items, of which you are going to be hopefully the program manager soon, you know, for which, by the way, congratulations if that is if that achievement is going to materialize. You're doing a good job. You know, items is one of those cornerstone peer group developments where TSOs can learn from each other, and our role is basically to facilitate, to be able to take a step back and to merge and to help companies distinguish what they're really good at, to identify gaps and challenges, and you know, enable the learnings that TSOs can have from each other, you know, and convert that back to the industry. So I think items, but not only items, because we have items, we have the one for the refineries as well. I think to have those peer groups joining and merging would be like a cornerstone in that idea that would keep me awake at night, you know, what I mentioned earlier. So if we can contribute by bringing those parties together, having discussions, identifying what they are good at, what they are still faced with from a challenge perspective, and learn from each other, and we can be the, let's say, the facilitator to enable all of that, then you know, I would be very pleased, very happy to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because obviously with items being around the corner, not so far away, we have the presence of various senior leaders across the organization who will be present there. And it's not we don't need a magic wand, because they will be there. But fast forward to, let's say, day 3, and we're about to close off the session. What would be your message to them, and why?
Okay. Right. So I would probably rephrase the value proposition. I would probably state something around the progress that we have made together, because I'm sure we will make significant progress, and we will make some disclosures to each other that are going to be eye-opening for all the participants. And you know, the conference is basically the crown jewel at the end of a cycle, of the item cycle, which took from 24-25, and we would then be looking forward to items cycle 25-26, you know, for the conference in 2 years' time, then to see how that basically the foundation that we have created together with the peers is providing a foundation to even a broader group of peers that could take their learnings from it and learn from the challenges also that also the other companies have. So my message would be around the progress that I'm sure we're going to make, and also putting an emphasis on the value that we and the responsibility that we have as an industrial group to society at large.
Yeah.
I think that is one of those key messages.
I think that's a pretty noble achievement as well as a mission. So with that in mind, I think that pretty much we've spoken a lot in depth about resilience, digitalization, and how all those things have a various different impact on not only utilities but also the wider energy value chain as a whole. With that in mind, I think that concludes a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. Are there any final thoughts or remarks?
Yeah, well, there is we didn't put so much emphasis on the energy transition, which is basically the bugger in the room, right?
Right.
Because the energy transition is the cause of many things. It's a trigger to many, let's say, positive developments. It's also the trigger to a lot of waste.
Right.
People don't fully realize it, but in the supply chain, to support everything that has to do with the energy transition, when it comes to renewables, people tend to go for, let's say, by now commoditized insights and solutions like wind and solar energy, for example. But I would also stress there are many other opportunities that are a lot cleaner and a lot more sustainable for environment that also need to be taken into consideration. And that's about the sources of energy. So you have the sources of energy and the impact that those sources of the energy have on the grid, on the distribution. So you got the generation, which basically renewable and conventional is putting a lot of stress and requires a lot of flexibility from both
the grid. Yeah.
Grid and distribution. And I think although every company realizes has different measures, different objectives. When it comes to the energy transition, I think one of the key objectives for companies is as well to do, like I said before, a resilience readiness check. It would also be good to do an energy transition readiness check because where do you want to be as a company in 20 years from now? From an energy transition perspective.
Yeah.
And if that objective is out there, where are you now? Are you on track? Because if you are not on track, we always say it should be going up there. But if you're diverting from a roadmap that may be in place, if you have a roadmap, and the gap between the roadmap and where you really are is too big, then at the end, you cannot recover, and that could be an existential threat to the company.
Yeah.
And existentiality has to do with resilience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
So how are you looking at the progress the participants in items are making? I mean, you're working on a daily, on an operational level with those companies.
Correct.
How's that going for you?
It's a journey. I think a lot of them acknowledge that for some of the changes that need to occur, it will take time. But there is a genuine concern, but also positivity around what could happen. A lot of them, from what I've experienced, are very open to collaboration, open to learning, which is where I think ITEMS is pivotal from that standpoint, because it's an opportunity for them to come together and openly discuss some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities that arise. And from what I've also gathered, that's really where the value is extracted in those moments of exchange, in those moments of learning. And like you mentioned earlier, us as facilitator almost, that's kind of our mission. How can we facilitate that ongoing exchange? Because that will ultimately impact not just the next year or 2 years, but next 5, 10, 15 years.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you when you talk with your the people that you interact with, what kind of what's the general mindset about items and the progress that items is making for them?
Is this for the clients in particular, or?
Yeah, well, it's on a personal level because there's always a liaison in those companies that is, the reference for items data, for example, right?
Yeah.
So how does it work for them? Is that like, is it stressful? Do they perceive items as absolutely value added for them in a personal way as well because they get more insights in the things that they have to do, or how is that working out for them?
From what I've experienced, particularly within the working groups. So the working groups is one of the areas that's been a new inclusion within this item cycle. And I believe that there's been an increased presence from various people within the organization, not just my particular liaison on the other end, but that liaison and the number of attendees that come from across the organization, whether that's within the digital team, whether that's someone working within the resilience area or the energy transition, because these topics have, as you've mentioned during this conversation, how they're all kind of intertwined. So they have an impact across the entire organization horizontally. And the feedback that I'm getting is that the learnings that they're getting is absolutely crucial. It is having a direct impact on how they view and make decisions on what I would consider quite strategic topics. So that's really where I believe the value comes from, and where I get a lot of pride and joy in being able to facilitate that exchange.
Okay, and you mentioned work streams. What are those work streams containing? What does it mean? Is it like digital or webinar type of thing?
Yeah. So the way I like to summarize it is there's 3 in total. The first one
per.
Three work streams within the benchmark.
Okay.
So the first work stream is a report, and that essentially is a benchmark of their asset management performance compared to their operational performance, and that is across the entire peer group. And asset management performance obviously has a multitude of domains that we assess, and what we really like to argue, or let's say our hypothesis, is how your asset management has a correlation on your operational performance. So it's a linear chart. And what we've seen based on the decades of data that we've received is good asset management performance has a direct correlation with good operational performance. So that's one area that we're really focused on, and we go into great detail.
Probably also reducing risk.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Increasing the ability to mitigate challenges,
yes.
And therefore increasing the resilience.
Yes,
well. Okay.
yes. Which we connection to what we've been discussing. Correct. And then if you look at the working groups, that tends to be more the contemporary topics that we discuss. So it's not coming from me or within the company. It's hand-selected topics provided by the peer group. So they provide their input, and all we do is facilitate that. And we try to summarize, categorize, and present those topics. So to give you a flavor of some of the topics that we discussed in this working group, you've mentioned quite a fair bit already, but it's the digital technology, so drones, for example. You mentioned the idea of managing data governance is one as well. We talked about risk. You mentioned risk management was the third one. And the big theme that we've also been discussing is resilience. So how do we decipher between what is considered strategic resilience, but also from a more operational level in terms of resilience? So having that clear divide is also the other topic that we discussed. So those working groups are also pivotal. It provides very clear, tangible information that are relevant. And then moving on to the third one, which is also what we discussed in this conversation, is the conference. So really bringing all the senior leaders into one physical on-site location and having what I would consider hopefully an exciting, jam-packed 2.5-day conference where it's really having an openness to an exchange, but also learning and facilitating a lot of the knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's helpful. And what's the frequency of getting together?
So the conference happens once every 2 years, but the working groups happen every sort of 3 months, the quarterly.
Yeah.
And you could say once a month we connect. So this is a scoping session where we really look at, okay, how do we scope what topics we're looking at? As you know, resilience is a wide topic, so we need to narrow it down. Digitalization is also quite a wide topic, so we want to know exactly within those realms, what are the key topics that need to be discussed and why. So that's the scoping session as well as the data analysis, and then the final webinar where a lot of the value is extracted, where we identify what we consider best practice, and they have their perspective and their views on how they view that particular topic, and then we have a knowledge exchange.
But definitely, it's not like a competition where one
No,
is
no.
outpacing the other one or something.
No.
It's just-
We're very clear on trying to avoid that. It's not about who's number one. It's more about how can we all get to number one, if that makes sense. And I understand that there is an element of competition because obviously people want to be the best. I completely understand that. But what we try to focus on is more on, okay, if you are number one, how can we learn from number one? And how can we then transfer that to everyone else within the peer group?
All right. So basically, I took the role of interviewing you a little bit about items, which, by the way, is
interesting.
Interesting as well, I think. Is there anything you feel we still have not touched for this little?
No, I think we covered a wide array of things, from the different themes to the conference, but also my inputs on where I see it going. So I think we've covered the majority of it.
So if people have questions, they can just reach out to us in items.
Correct.
At ohrosgroup.com, right?
Correct.
Items, ITAMS.
Yeah, ITAMS.
And then
correct.
at ohrosgroup.com. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was an interesting one. We haven't done so many of these, and
no, not at all.
I think it's let's see if our audience is going to like it, and we may
hopefully there's
want to launch a couple of
a lot of
more
attraction and engagement where we can continue it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Ennio.
Yeah.
Nice.
How long was that actually?
I have no idea.